So, good morning to my talk. Welcome. My talk is named Symfony2 Forms Past, Present, Future. And there's still a couple of people coming in, so I'm just waiting for everybody to be there. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Bernhard Schussek, as Jeremy Miklo would put it. You can also just say Bernhard Schussek, which is the name in German, so as you see, it's not like really easy to get. Most people don't figure my name out. That kind of sucks. So there's actually just one version and it's Schussek, but you don't need to remember that, it's not important. So most of the people end up just saying Bernhard or Web Mozart, or actually majority of them, that forms guy, because it's easy to remember. I'm from Austria, but not this one. This one. A little smaller. It's kind of well known for a couple of things, like a very, very, very bad English accent, because people are talking like this over there, and I actually thought about like giving a presentation like this, but then other people would just be running away, you know. So I'm trying to stick to my best English that I can give you. So, and yeah, don't let yourself get confused by that if you ever go there. You can actually enter, but we do not like outsiders too much, so just in case. But this talk is not about jokes about me or my country. It's about the form component in Symfony2, and the form component has a very long evolution by now. So if anybody remembers, back in days in 2008, in Symfony 1.1, that was the first version of the framework that had some kind of object-oriented form library. And it was kind of, you know, you had this base class as a form, and you inherited that form, and there were these two validator schema and widget schema classes. Is there anybody among you that used this before? Awesome. Is anybody of you that did not have problems with that before? So yeah, it was the same for me, so I decided to like fix this in a few weeks. That was like 3 years ago, and I'm still not done. So Symfony 2 was first released in 2010. And basically, we redesigned all the library to, you know, do what you have seen there. Like the main concept is that you have these form trees, and you can nest forms, whichever like depth you want. Yeah, and actually, since Symfony 1.0, the form library grew quite steadily. So that's the non-comment lines of code, everything except comments. That was Symfony 1.0. Here's the release of Symfony 1.1 that featured the first form library. And then Symfony 1.4, which was the last version of the Symfony 1 version. And then in Symfony 2, like, we redesigned everything. Like, we first started just improving, you know, the existing version, and then in the end we turned out just like changing basically everything. So 2.0 came out in somewhere 2010, and between 2.0 and 2.1 there was a very long time with a lot of changes that like broke a lot of stuff. Is there anybody who did not have problems when upgrading from 2.0 to 2.1? Awesome. So yeah, it was kind of rough, but since 2.0 everything went kind of smoothly, I guess, I hope. And so Symfony 2.3 long-term version support was released this year, just in June, because we started our new 6-month life cycle. So June 3 was 2.3, like we had 2.4 right now. June 3, 3rd June, like next year is going to be 2.5 and so on. And with 2.3 we had quite a lot of new features in the form component, some of which you probably don't know yet. For example, one thing that got fixed in version 2.3 and 2.2, like as of, you know, subversion 10.7, it's not really a new feature, it's just something that got fixed and that many people probably don't know that you can do, It's returning immutable associations from your like entity classes, which is very useful if you want to prevent that, you know, other people are modifying the relationship. You could add an add tag and remove tag method, and then you are really sure that nobody else can actually add or remove tags. And before, like this subversion, you couldn't do that because of some minor bug. And so we fixed that, and now it's actually very nice to, you know, encapsulate your model and your associations. Another thing that was added to Symfony 2.3 was buttons in forms. So before that, you just had to include the HTML, input, type, submit, or button, whatever, in your form. And as of 2.3, you can actually do this. So there's 3 different types of buttons: submit, reset, and just button, which is kind of self-explanatory. Button can be used for, you know, JavaScript support, stuff like that. And the rest just works normally as it does in the browser. You can also check whether buttons have been clicked now, which is a very, very nice new feature. So you just receive the form element that corresponds to the button and check the isClicked method. So you can easily add multiple submit buttons to the form and then check which of them was used to submit the form. And do different things depending on that. You can also disable validation. So if you set validation groups to false on the form, then the form will not be validated at all. And you can also set this method to like specific submit buttons to disable validation just for these buttons, or to specify validation groups that are used just for these buttons, like when you use these buttons to submit the form. And that's pretty handy too. So a consequence of the submit buttons and like the button support was that we could simplify request handling in Symfony 2.3. So for example, before Symfony 2.3, you used code like this to check whether a form was submitted, and so you need to check whether the request method is right, and then you need to execute form bind, and then you can check whether the form is valid. So that, like for basically every form, this was the same in Symfony 2.2 and 2.1. So people ended up implementing request handler services and, you know, like wrapping stuff to hide this common logic and this duplicated logic away. So I thought, why can't we do that in the core? So yeah, that was the HTML that you used to render a form. And also this was always the same. You had the form tag, right? And you had the path. You had to make sure that the method here matches the method that you check in the controller. You always have to make sure that you include this form enc type stuff so that file fields were correctly. It was kind of tedious. So I changed this. And as of Symfony 2.3, you can actually pass the URL that the form should be submitted to as an option, and then just use handler request. And handler request has all this logic that is on the previous step, like internally. You can really check it out. It's actually delegating the logic to a request handler object, which you can replace. And so it's basically just checking is the method in the request actually correct, and if it is was the form submitted, and then it does all this stuff. So now you can just do this and then check whether the form was submitted and is valid. Actually, you can, you know, just skip this submitted part and just ask whether the form was valid. But that's not as, in my opinion, that's not as readable as including the submitted check, because here you really know that, okay, the form is submitted and it is valid. As for the rendering, you can now replace the form tags in HTML with these new form start and form end helper, which will do, you know, just the same thing as before. But since we pass the action of the form in the controller, we can generate the complete tag. And the form end tag actually does just like, you know, the closing form tag, but we need a separate helper. Otherwise, you will get HTML errors, like validation errors in your IDE, which is prevented by this helper. And there's even a shortcut for that, so you can just call the new form helper as of 2.3. And those people that use Symfony 1.1 probably find this very familiar, right? So in Symfony 1.1, we always, told everybody that this was just a shortcut for prototyping. And in Symfony 2.2, it's the same. If you, create a new form, then you use this shortcut and you quickly get a nice view of the form, which you can later change. The difference between Symfony 1 and Symfony 2 in this case is that in Symfony 2 you got very powerful means of theming your form. So you can actually use this helper together with form themes, for example, form themes in the same template, to completely customize the rendering of the form. So you don't need to write all the HTML from scratch. Instead, you just override the blocks for specific fields that you want to customize, and you save a lot of code in this way. So, in my opinion, it's actually fine to use this helper in production systems and just use theming to customize the rendering. And if you have other requests and post requests, you can just add this method option, which can be any of the other HTTP options like patch or put, or post, of course, or delete. And then the form will make sure that it is only submitted or handled when the method is actually patch in the request. You can also pass get here, but yeah. The nice thing in Symfony 2.3 is that you can actually submit patch forms. So if a form has a couple of fields and you do a patch submission with just some of the fields, then this actually validates in Symfony 2.3. That didn't work before. It was one of the first or one of the oldest issues that we had on GitHub, and I'm happy that we could finally close that. And the same configuration options exist on the form builder interface. So if you use a form builder to construct a form in your controller, you can just use set action and set method, and these things are going to do the same. So what else? In Symfony 2.3, we have way more powerful dynamic forms than we had before. Actually, it was just a simple, a very small change, but this change allows a lot of new stuff. That's pretty cool. So let's see. In Symfony 2.3, you can attach event listeners to individual fields of the form. So actually, this worked before. You could do the same before Symfony 2.3. The difference was that if you added new fields in this event listener, then Symfony would not, process these fields. It would just ignore them because they were added, yeah. It would just ignore them. So as of Symfony 2.3, if you add event listeners to fields, you can actually add and remove fields in these event listeners, and this will work. So let's see what is happening here. For example, assume that you have a form with a country field, very typical example. And once you set the data of that form with some, for example, shop object, then the shop object is stored in the form. The different properties are forwarded to the fields of the form, and now at the setData method of this field, the postSetData event is thrown. And since we added the closure in the previous code snippet, the method add is called. It's adding a province field. We actually have access to the country that was selected by the user. And the interesting thing is the country is in model format, so you already have the doctrine instance or your object. It's not the submitted ID or anything like that, but it's already the reverse transformed data. So in the closure, you can access this country and, for example, pass it to the query builder or something like that to configure this new field. And the field is added to the form tree, and the form will just continue setting the data of the newly added field as well. And this is what wouldn't happen before. So before setData would never be called here. Yeah, the postSetData event is thrown there as well. It's just not handled because there's no listener. And then at last, the postSetData event of the complete form is fired. You can add the same closure to the post submit event. And in this case, you make sure that the same logic is executed when you first construct the form and set some default values, and when you submit the form and update the field. So that's pretty cool. And during submission, the same thing takes place as set data. So you have submit, and the submit is forwarded to all the individual fields. You have the post submit event, the closure is executed, so the field is updated, right? And then the form component just goes on to call submit on all the nested fields and fires all these events, and that's it. So just a couple of weeks ago, actually, just a little more than a week, we released Symfony 2.4. Is there anybody that already tried the new version? Cool. So for everybody else, I really recommend to look at it. There's some really cool new features in that, like the expression language that Fabien already talked about. It's a really powerful feature, so try it. And Symfony 2.4 also had some additions for the form component. So one of the major things that was added was the new Form Debugger. Is there anybody that used the debugger already? Not so many. So the debugger, the Form Debugger, is a new panel in the web profiler. It looks something like this. You know, I just took a screenshot of the part of the web debugger that is relevant, so you can actually read some of the text. And what you see in the debugger is the form tree on the left side with all the different objects in the form tree. So here you have some, you know, ship form, and then you have a field name class. There's a button update class. There's a collection field for mount points, and then you have, you know, an entry and another entry, and there's a child field here as well. And the same goes on for the rest. And you can also see that there's this is a ref token that is added later on. And in fact, this page doesn't just have one form, but two forms, because this is a delete form, just a delete button. And it's just got one button and the CSRF token as well. So the form debugger is a very nice way to, you know, find out which objects, or to visualize which objects exist in your form, right? And the nice thing is, each of these buttons is clickable. So you can just, you know, click on, for example, equipment, and then you will see a lot of information about this field, like what data is currently stored, or what data was actually stored in the beginning, like what is the default data that was set to this field. Here, for example, we have the form, and the default data is a ship instance, and like in normalized format, you also see the view format and the model format, which is the same in this case, because there's no model transformer and no view transformer. So we just, you know, have the same thing. The form was not submitted. You can find this information here. As soon as you submit the form, you see the same information for the form submission. So you know exactly what data was in the form in the beginning and what data was in the form after submission. And this is very useful to, you know, understand what, you know, what kind of data is stored in the form and like how the transformation process works. You can also see the different options. So resolved options will contain all the different options of the selected field and the values, their actual values. And passed option will just contain the options that were passed when you called the add method, right? Or when you created the form. So for this form, for example, we just passed the method action, which I just, the option action, which I explained to you before, the option data, which contains the default data, and the option method, which is put, because it's an update form. And here you see all the other options and their current values. And the very nice thing that you can't see right now, but it's because if you have to scroll down quite a bit, is view variables. So for each element in the form tree, you can see exactly which variables you can access in the view, in your template. So you know you have this like form.vars.id, for example, notation. Or you can get form.name.vars.id, then you get the ID of the name field. And in this list down there, you can see all of the variables for the selected field and all their current values. So this is very nice when you want to display some information about a field and you're not sure how to access that information. So for example, assume that you want to access some property of this ship in the view, and you don't have any clue how to do that, right? So here you would just scroll down, way down. Then you see the list of view variables, and then you just check which of the view variables contains a ship instance. And you will see that there is a data variable in the view which contains a ship instance, so you can just do form.vars.data. Whatever, my method, to access methods in your model. So that's pretty cool. It's not perfect yet. So when you submit the form and the form has got some errors, you will see the errors in the very top here. You will just see a list of all the errors that are associated to each of, to the selected node. So you won't see all errors, but just the errors that are here on the ship form, like global errors, you know. If you have an error in the name field, you can click on the name field and you will see the errors there. And one thing I want to improve for Symfony 2.5 is that you can actually see where the error comes from. So this is a very, very frequent source of confusion. You know, you have an error and it bubbles up to the top and it says this value is not valid, and you have no clue what value the error is actually talking about. So in Symfony 2.5, hopefully you will see the cause of that error is that this and this and this happened with this and this property, or something like this. Another feature that was added to Symfony 2.4, or it's not really a feature, but a very, very small modification. We split the security component into 3 different subcomponents. So actually, we didn't modify any code at all, because the security component was already organized in that way. It has 3 different namespaces, like top-level namespaces, for core, for ACL, and that's new CSRF is the code that was contained in the form component for CSRF handling. We just moved it to the security component. And the thing that is new is that we added the composer.json file to each of these namespaces, which contains names like Symfony security-CSRF. So now you can use each of the individual namespaces in the security component individually. For example, if you need some CSRF support in your library, you can just include Symfony security-CSRF without having to load all the ACL support, which is pretty big. And the new CSRF subcomponent is actually pretty nice. It's very simple. So you have a new CSRF token manager, which is a very, very simple object for creating CSRF tokens and validating them. You can create new CSRF tokens by using the getToken method, and the first and only argument to that method is some kind of ID. So in the end, you have CSRF tokens that are associated to specific IDs that you can choose. The IDs don't necessarily need to be secret. You just need to make sure that when you created a token and when you validate a token that is provided by the user, that you use the same ID. And obviously, the ID should not be modifiable by the user. It should be hard-coded in the application, or at least deterministic. And yeah, then you can just echo token get value or token get ID if you want to find out the ID, but token get value if you want to add CSRF protection to some kind of URL, stuff like that. And later on, when you validate the token, you just create a new CSRF token object with the ID and the token that was provided by the user. And you can just pass this token manager to the isTokenValid method of the token manager, the CSRF token manager, which will tell you if the CSRF token is valid or not. So that's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, I think. And apart from moving all the logic from the form component to this new subcomponent, the generation of the CSRF token was also improved to be more secure. So anytime you call the getToken method, you get a completely random token now, so which is way better than before, because before it was some kind of hash value of the session ID, and it was kind of reproducible. But now it's really a random value, which is much more secure. Another nice new feature in Symfony 2.4 is an improved callback constraint. So is there anybody of you that used the callback constraint before? Awesome. So you know that previously the callback constraint worked something like this. You had to put the constraint on a class that you wanted to validate, and then you just passed this methods option and like specified one or more methods that you want to call during the validation process. And the validation method has an execution context interface object which lets you add violations, validate other objects, like do some stuff, dynamic stuff that is pretty handy. But like doing so at the top of the class was kind of, not so nice in my opinion. So what we did in Symfony 2.4, we made it possible that you can just put this callback annotation on, or like the callback constraint if you're using YAML or XML, of course, and just put it on any methods, and the method will be executed by the validator. So it's just a small change, but I think it's a very nice one. So what about the future? Has anybody of you seen this post before? Right, so probably mostly the Spanish-speaking people. So Javier, who was here yesterday, I don't know if he's awake already, posted this very nice post about el preocupante futuro de Symfony de los formularios, which basically means the very, very, how do you say preocupante in English? Yeah, concerning, basically very concerning future about the form library. And he basically said that there's a few things that are problematic right now. And I want to respond to that by like in this session instead of just writing a blog post and be done with it. So his first issue that he mentioned in the blog post was that the form component is constantly changing. So let's look at this. Here's a very simple diagram with two different values. The number of lines of code, like non-common lines of code, that's the same thing that we saw in the beginning, since Symfony 1.0 actually. So of the form component, that's important, not of complete Symfony core. And you also see the commit count, like the number of commits that was made for each individual version of Symfony. So you see between Symfony 1.4 and 2.0, that was pretty crazy. It was like 800 commits. And between 2.0 and 2.1, the code bases grew quite a lot. And we still had quite a lot of commits. So in that time, the form component actually changed a lot. But since Symfony 2.1, the growth of the code base actually slowed down, and also the commit count slowed down quite a lot. So you see for the previous two versions, Symfony 2.3 and Symfony 2.4, there were much less commits for the form component than for the previous version, which signifies in a way that it's becoming much more stable. We don't need to change so many things anymore because many things already work nicely. We need to polish things, we need to enhance things, but we don't need to rewrite anything or redesign anything. So as of Symfony 2.1, Fabien announced a promise. He said that there would be no more backwards compatibility breaks, and that's very important for us. But the question is, what is a backwards compatibility break? So for example, let's look at this code. That's a change that I made in, I'm not sure, I think Symfony 2.2 or 2.3, something like that. We have this existing class somewhere, buried in the core, and I decided that we need a new dependency and added a new constructor, right? So you think that's pretty, not a problem. You have a default value in the constructor, so if nobody is passing any value here, that stuff is working and backwards compatible. But in fact, it's not so easy. If you look at this userland code, somebody could have extended the mapper with a custom mapper and implemented a custom constructor function before. And since there was no constructor in the base class, there's no parent construct here. So as soon as we add the new constructor, this code is actually broken, right? And the way to fix this is to just add a new call to parent, call construct. So what I want to say is that if we do enhancements to the core, like to some classes that are usually not used and usually not overwritten, we cannot guarantee that there is actually nobody that overwrote that class. So even if we do small enhancements like this, somebody's code will break. And even though we said, as of Symfony 2.1, we'll have no more BC breaks, we cannot guarantee that there will be no more BC breaks at all. Otherwise, we don't have any possibilities to enhance the code base anymore. We can just do very, very small changes. We cannot change any classes anymore. We cannot change any signatures anymore, even though there might be just two people actually extending the class or using that method that we're changing. So you kind of have to extend that promise to, we will be doing no more BC breaks when using documented functionality. So if you read something in the documentation and you read this is possible and it works like this, then we're really trying hard to not break that. And actually, we want to guarantee that. But if you're using some class buried in the class structure, it might happen that you need to do small changes when upgrading to a new version, as the one that you saw before. Of course, we're always documenting these changes in the changelog, or in the upgrade file, actually. So, like, the change before was documented, and when you upgrade, just check it, and if there is any issue like that, I hope it will not be too hard to fix. And at this point, we can see BC breaks and deprecations in previous versions, so that's a typo here, that should be 2.0. You saw that from 2.0 to 2.1, there was a lot of BC breaks and a lot of deprecations because we implemented the new library in 2.0, and then we saw that a lot of stuff didn't work as well as we liked to. And so we changed things to improve them, to make things possible that weren't possible before. But as of 2.1, as I showed you before, like the code grew more and more stable. So we just had to do minor BC breaks. And minor BC breaks means like breaks like the one before, changing an interface of some class that probably nobody is using anyway. But still it's a BC break because maybe there is someone actually extending that class, right? So. And in Symfony 2.4, there's actually no BC break and no deprecation at all. And if we follow that trend, it's probably, hopefully, very nice in the next versions as well. So the second claim that Javier made is that basic features are missing. Like, for example, a captcha field. But if anyone of you used the Genemo form bundle before, it's a very nice bundle. It provides a lot of custom field types, a lot of field types with JavaScript support, and it provides a captcha type and a reCAPTCHA type and all that stuff. So even though we don't have any core, there's a very good bundle about that. Same goes for dependent select fields. It's actually not the same, but dependent select fields are kind of an issue right now, as probably everybody knows. You can use event listeners, and as of Symfony 2.3, there's actually no limitation anymore, but it's very, very hard to use. And I know that, so we have a solution here, but it's not nice, and I want to work on that in the future. Another issue that Javier mentioned are multi-step forms, so forms where you have multiple pages. But there's Form Flow bundle. You can see there's a solution from the community as well. And the last issue he mentioned was JavaScript validation, but also there is I just discovered this bundle yesterday, actually. It looks pretty cool. I didn't try it so far, but I think Benjamin Ebelei also published some bundle that did JavaScript validation, at least in a limited way. So you can see that the community is really able to add a lot of features that we don't have in core. And we don't necessarily need to have them in core, because now that we have Composer, it's really easy to add new features. Of course, I don't want to say that we don't have any problems. So in fact, there are features missing from the core. And you can see that if you just look at the GitHub issue tracker, Right now in Symfony 2.4 we have about 200 issues reported for the form component, around 50 of which are feature requests, 50 more which are enhancements, so improvements for existing features, some bugs, and the rest is unlabeled. That wasn't processed yet so far. So you see that there's a lot of room for improvement, and we're going to work on that, but we need your help. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on. So the third claim that Javier made was that there is no defined roadmap for the form component. And this is kind of true, but we don't really have and need a roadmap since we got all the information about bugs and features that we want to implement in the issue tracker. So if you want to find out which bugs are currently reported for the form component, just check out the issue tracker, tick the form label, tick the bug label, and you will see all the bugs that are currently reported and that we are working on. You can also tick the form label and the feature label to see all the features that we're planning to do. So basically all of the features that will be added to the form component in the foreseeable future are listed there. There's no big surprise coming which isn't listed in this list. So if you want to know about possible future changes, just take an afternoon, read through the different issues, check whether you can maybe implement one of them. The information is there. Of course, the issue tracker doesn't tell you anything about the order that we will implement the tickets in. It doesn't tell you anything about priorities. So this is basically the priorities in very general speaking. The highest priority for us are obviously bugs. We want to fix bugs, we want to stabilize the code that we already have. And then we want to make enhancements to existing features, because there's a lot of features like dependent fields that work but could be easier, or that work but have limitations in some cases. So we really want to enhance these existing features. And only at the very top of this pyramid you see that we actually want to work on new features as well. But the priority for us is very low because the community can add a lot of features thanks to the very extensible structure of the form component. And it's more important for us to fix bugs and to enhance what we already have than implement and add just new stuff all the way. All right? So what about the roadmap? The first priority right now for us, simplify dependent fields, because that's really a pain. So this needs to be fixed soon. But it's kind of difficult. So I can't really tell you when this is going to happen because it depends on when we find a good solution. And the second priority is simplified theming. Right now, if you create form themes and if you want to customize a form in the view of a form, for example, if you want to add a CSS class to some field in the form, this is kind of hard, especially with Twig, because you can't modify the view variables in the template, not easily. So I want to improve that. And there's actually a couple of tickets that are related to this problem. And all the other priorities are really just small enhancements and bug fixes that you can find on the issue tracker. So there's no clear order for these enhancements. It depends on when people are helping us to work on that. And there are not really any enhancements that are more important than others, because many have an equal weight and an equal importance. The last claim that Javier made is that there is no community support for the form component. And unfortunately, this is very true. So if we look at the form component between Symfony 2.0 and 2.4 and look at the commit count, you see that the commit count went down, but also the number of authors went down quite a lot. So there's a relationship here between less authors and less commits. So the question really is, how can we get more people to help? How can we help you to get involved and develop features and fix bugs? So the easiest way that I hear most of the time is you can just go to the bug tracker, create a new issue. That's very easy. So it's already a form of involvement. You already participate, and that's really important. So if any of you have an issue with the form component or any other of the Symfony code, then probably there's a lot of people that have the same issue, right? And if that issue is not reported to the bug tracker and there is no existing ticket yet, there's no way that the developers of Symfony can know about this issue and know that it's necessary to fix this issue, right? So this is very, very important contribution in the form of just, creating a ticket, like adding description. That's very important, and it's very easy to do. Then you could also implement a bug fix or implement a new feature. You can just take a ticket from GitHub and try to implement it. But the problem is this is kind of hard. Right now in Symfony, there's very, very little easy tickets left. So most of the easy stuff has already been implemented, and the stuff that is like the tickets that are left are kind of hard because they, require a lot of knowledge about the internals, and new people that want to get involved usually don't have that much knowledge to fix the issue. So new people usually don't know how to get involved and how to fix things without, spending a month on the Symfony core. So the question really is, how can we get you, the community, to contribute, to make changes, and at the same time to be able to experiment with the existing framework and to learn about the core, so they can get more information, make better bug fixes in the future, and understand what's going on internally. And the process that I'm proposing here is learning by reproducing. So the idea here is very simple. You take an issue, you try to reproduce it, some bug report. You can reproduce it easily by just forking the Symfony Standard Edition, trying to reproduce what the creator of the issue described, uploading the fork, and posting a link in the comment of the issue. That's a very simple possibility of contributing, and you actually help us a lot. So it's very easy. And if you have more time, you can then check whether you can understand why this bug is actually happening. You can check the code, you can check the core, you can try to understand the problem source, and you can describe it in the ticket, in the comment. And in this way, you get to learn more about how the code is working internally, what the processes are, etc., etc. And at last, if you have enough understanding, you can actually fix the bug, right? But the nice thing is that these things are, it's a process with optional steps. If you just reproduce an issue and post the branch for reproducing the issue, that's already a big help for us. You don't need to go ahead and try to understand the bug and fix it. That's not necessary. You can do that if you want, but if you don't have time for that, it's not necessary. And if we look at the core development of Symfony, what we do is we take an issue, a bug report from the issue tracker, and then we spend time trying to reproduce this issue. And maybe we figure out that we can't reproduce it because there is information missing, maybe it's misconfiguration on the user system. So all the time spent for reproducing the issue is kind of lost. Then we take some other ticket, again, we try to reproduce it. We find that, okay, we can actually reproduce this bug on our system. So we try to fix it, and we find out we can't fix it. Maybe it would break BC, or there's some other reason that we can't fix a bug, right? So again, quite a lot of time was spent on an issue without any actual value created after that. So we take another ticket, we again try to reproduce it, and we try to implement a fix. And this time we succeed and commit the fix to Symfony. So only this time that we spent on developing core was actually used to enhance the code base, right? All the other time was just kind of lost. I mean, we have no more information about after that, but it doesn't help you anything. So ideally for me, core development would be something like this. I know about a ticket, I know if it's a bug or not. I can just download a branch that someone created, which reproduces the issue. I download the branch, I execute a command, or I load the page in the browser, and I can reproduce the issue, and I can go straight ahead to fix the issue. And if it's not fixable, I didn't lose so much time. I can just go on to the next issue and fix it, and go on to the next issue and implement it. And the same is true for all the other core developers. We spend a lot of time on additional organizational work that slows down development quite a lot, right? So learning by reproducing is not just a way for you to contribute and to learn about the Symfony code base and to get involved. It's also a way for us to speed up development. And so we actually have benefits on both sides, right? It's a win-win situation. You know more about the framework, which means you are more successful in your projects because you can extend the core, you know exactly what's going on internally, and at the same time we can just download your branches and reproduce issues and fix them. And that's what I would like to see in the future. I would like to see you get involved, you know. Also, if you create a ticket, make sure you attach a branch that is executable, that actually reproduces the issue that you're having. And if you want to get started with that, I very, very invite you to come to the Hack Day tomorrow. We're going to help you set up your machines. We're going to show you how to submit a pull request, how to download the standard edition, how to, you know, actually create an issue, fork the standard edition, and upload the reproduction branch. And yes, there will be food, there will be drinks. So I hope many of you will come tomorrow. And that's it. Are there any questions? So I guess everybody's sleeping still. Get some coffee. Thanks.